What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to jump in and talk about what I think are the best exotics inside of the Warmind expansion and Season 3. So we will be looking at the new exotics that have come in the DLC, but I'm also going to include some other vanilla exotics from D2 that have actually been buffed. There are a handful of very solid exotic weapons right now, so I'm going to jump in and talk about them. There'll be 5 kind of main weapons that I'll speak about. These aren't in any particular order, they're all pretty awesome, but also give a shout to a couple of others as well, so let's jump into it. First up, I wanted to talk about the Huckleberry. This is the new submachine gun that's come in this expansion, and it's a pretty neat kinetic exotic SMG. It has a pretty cool intrinsic perk, so as you fire the weapon, the rate of fire will increase, and that'll mean more recoil as well, but kills with the weapon will reload a portion of the magazine. And in terms of how much ammo it gives you, it is pretty generous. On top of this though, you have Rampage, so kills with the weapon temporarily grant increased damage. You can stack this up to 3 times. So that's going to mean the follow-up kills, after you've made 1 or 2 kills, are only going to get quicker if you're kind of just shooting trash mobs and stuff like that. And so in general, for that type of stuff, it is a really fun weapon. It falls short a little bit in some instances, because you'll proc Rampage, you'll get ammo returned to the magazine and everything like that, and then you'll be hitting a pretty tanky target, and it can actually put out a lot of damage with Rampage active, but then you'll hit the bottom of that magazine and it is a little bit jarring. That's really the only downside I can think of for the Huckleberry though. Should also mention that the catalyst for Huckleberry can be found through heroism in the most challenging adventures, and this will actually grant Ambitious Assassin for the weapon, which overflows the magazine based on the number of rapid kills before reloading. So as well as getting ammo returned to the mag, that will actually allow the mag size to increase. So this is going to be really good on this weapon. And overall, I think Huckleberry is a really neat exotic. Next though, we have Sleeper Simulant. How could we leave this thing out of the list? Of course, it has returned from D1, and the weapon fires a laser which over-penetrates enemies and refracts off hard surfaces. So it is a linear fusion rifle, and to me, Sleeper Simulant kind of does what all linear fusion rifles should have been closer to doing from the beginning. It can put out a lot of damage. If you're dealing with tanky targets, mages and stuff like that, you can take them out in 1 or 2 shots in a lot of cases. It's going to be a very good weapon for DPS as well. The weapon kind of speaks for itself. The only downsides versus D1 is that the magazine size has been dropped from 3 rounds to 2, which is definitely a shame, although you can carry generally plenty of ammo by getting ammo pickups. I don't think folks have run many DPS tests on these new exotics versus the other stuff that's been strong in the game so far, so we'll have to see what the new potential best is with all the new weapons and changes that we've seen. Nonetheless though, Sleeper Simulant is fantastic. Of course, this one comes from the lengthy exotic quest on Mars. But now let's talk about a vanilla weapon. So this is Darcy, which of course saw a significant buff in the May update. It has Personal Assistant, aim at an enemy to view its health and other critical information in the scope. And when that intrinsic perk, Personal Assistant, is active, the weapon actually gets increased target acquisition, and it will deal significantly more precision damage. So basically, once the scope locks in, you will get a ton of damage on the weapon, and it's really good for taking out, once again, mages. You can use it for boss DPS and things like that. Some folks are saying it's now the best exotic in the game. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but it is absolutely one of the best snipers in the game now, especially for PvE content. I should also mention that there is a masterwork version of this. I have very little progress on it right now, but it will give it a 20-point stability increase, which, considering, that you can fire the weapon so quickly to do damage, is going to make it easier to actually land those shots. So Darcy is absolutely a weapon that you should check out. Now though, another weapon, which is a vanilla weapon upgraded in Season 3, we're going to look at the Graviton Lance. So this was one of the big buffs they spoke about a lot. Graviton Lance comes with Black Hole. Second shot of a burst rips a hole through space-time, doing high damage and recoil with no fall-off. On top of this, Cosmology, kills with the weapon cause enemy targets to detonate and spawn void projectiles that track targets. So it is now a 2-round burst, but it's kind of unusual because it's firing a primer shot and then a follow-up shot very quickly. So it doesn't really even feel like it bursts at all. It feels more like a scout rifle, but it is absolutely firing 2 rounds, and that means you have to be pretty careful with your precision damage. You want to make sure both of those rounds hit. If you let that recoil get the better of you, then you can miss one of your shots. Sometimes you'll only hit the primer shot, so in PvP you'll say like 10 damage and nothing else on a crit, and that basically means you've missed the follow-up shot. So it takes a little bit of time to get used to exactly how this thing fires, and for that reason it's hard to tell how competitive Graviton Lance will really be down the road, especially as more masterworks and things like that get unlocked. but it is a solid weapon. It's incredibly fun to use, and you can kill very quickly with it inside of the Crucible if you land those shots. You can also occasionally get double kills with the kind of explosion. So in Crucible in particular, I think it's a pretty fun weapon at the moment. In PvE, it's okay. It's good for dealing with lower tier enemies, but for anything tanky, you know, you won't really notice the benefits of that exotic perk a ton, which has always kind of been the case with any kind of AoE explosion. Graviton Lance is a really fun weapon to use. They've done some really cool stuff with it. It'll also be possible to unlock a Masterwork version for Graviton Lance that gives it the perk Hidden Hand. That won't be available until faction rallies by the looks of things. You have to pledge to Dead Orbit to get it, but it has some potential to be very, very good. The next main weapon that I want to give a brief shout to would be the Tractor Cannon. So of course it has a repulsor force, it emits a powerful impulse that pushes enemies away. Now it can also suppress their abilities, just like a suppressor grenade that works in the Crucible as well as PvE, and it increases vulnerability to void damage. And so what you have is a very interesting weapon. It's the kind of weapon that you're going to have to use when you have a very specific setup in mind. You know, if you're in the Crucible and you're using it, you're going to be looking to boot people off the map and take them out of supers, mostly for fun. And that's fine, it's pretty good at doing that. Inside of PvE content though, the suppression and the bonus void damage can actually be used very intelligently. You know, you can set up your team, if you've got 3 void walkers or 3 void subclasses, a void burn, then you can really use this to do a lot of damage. So there isn't all that much more to say about Tractor Cannon. The damage buff when you hit a target with it, I believe, lasts for 10 seconds, and in that time any other void damage will do a lot of damage. So again, we'll find more utilities for it, but I think it's a really interesting change. So those are the main weapons which I think are pretty interesting so far. There is of course the Polaris Lance, and this is the exotic scout rifle that everyone's chasing right now with the quest. We don't know how good this will really be just yet, but it is a 150 RPM scout rifle. It comes with the perfect fifth. Precision hits return ammo to the mag, and landing 4 precision hits loads a delayed solar explosive round to your next shot. So it certainly has some potential, but really I'd want to reserve any further judgment about that until we actually get the weapon. To remark on the Worldline Zero, the exotic sword from the DLC, it's actually quite a bit of fun to use. I think the exotic perk is pretty decent. It does some interesting stuff. There are really 2 problems for this weapon. Firstly, ammo can be a bit of an issue. I'd kind of like to see them bump up that ammo capacity for PvE stuff. On top of this, I actually think it could potentially be a bit stronger for PvE stuff as well. I guess we'll find out when we're at those kind of upper light levels. It's a really cool sword, but it's just missing something right now. I think maybe a bit more power. Definitely ammo needs looking at, but that seems to be a thing everywhere in the game. Otherwise, it is pretty interesting. The Soros regime, honestly, it's the Soros regime. Does everything it did in D1, it does it just about as well. I just don't feel like it's that uber exciting. If you're a really big fan of it, then you're probably happy to have it. It just doesn't quite do the same thing that something like Sleeper does, you know? Sleeper kind of brings in an archetype which is definitely missed, and it improves on linear fusion rifles as we know them for the moment. And the Soros is kind of just the Soros. It's not quite as exciting as that in my opinion, but let me know what you guys think below. I should also mention the Skyburner's Oath buff, which I think is pretty cool in concept. I haven't used it much in PvP content, but honestly, when it's firing ADS, I still feel like it just fires so slow that it just is not that much fun to use. The hipfire thing, however, is really, really cool. Having explosive rounds there does help, you know, whether you're ADSing or hipfiring. So that is a positive change, especially for the hipfire though. Being able to fire quicker from the hip was always an interesting idea, but just never felt that good. However, I do feel like you can be more efficient by using the other common archetypes, Better Devils, the Nameless Midnight, and just hitting precision shots on enemies. Crimson, on the other hand, has definitely improved with this update. So they basically sped up the rate of fire, they looked at the range on the weapon a little bit. You can get a Masterwork, which bumps up the range by 20 points again, and I'm hearing that this is pretty good. The change with the ammo as well has been pretty significant. Actually having ammo in the weapon is really good. Carries a ton of reserves now. So I think Crimson is another very solid exotic buff that we've seen. And I think, guys, that pretty much rounds it out in terms of exotics that have seen changes, which I think are pretty interesting or exciting, as well as a look at the new exotics. So I'll be curious to hear what you guys think below as always. Obviously, I can't talk about every single weapon here, so if there are any you're really enjoying using, be sure to let us know in the comment section. If you have enjoyed the video though, a like is really appreciated below. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit subscribe to see a lot more Destiny 2 content. For now though, I appreciate you watching as always, and I will catch you guys very soon.